It can be an incredibly frightening experience to find a lump on your breast that you have never noticed before. It's the most discussed symptom of breast cancer. But do you know what you should do after finding a lump? Do you know what other symptoms you should be on the lookout for? Does a lump necessarily mean you have breast cancer? And is a monthly self-check of our breasts really necessary? These are some common breast cancer questions we answer in this Breast Cancer Trials podcast. We sat down with Breast Cancer Trials board member and medical oncologist, Associate Professor Nicholas Wilcken, and asked him what are the most common symptoms of breast cancer.
So I think the first thing to say about symptoms of breast cancer is often there are very few or there aren't any. The second thing to say is that breast cancer is not an emergency. If you think there's something abnormal about your breast, and I'll come to what that might be in a second, you don't want to sit around watching that for 6 to 12 months, but nor do you have to panic and see the doctor in a week or two's time. You can afford to wait 3 or 4 weeks and see, is this really different? Is this really new? Is this really something happening? In terms of what you might see, you might notice particularly if you, obviously without any clothes on, top half, if you're looking at yourself in the mirror with your hands on your head, you may see that there's some asymmetry or some part of the breast pulled in. When I say asymmetry, it's quite common for one breast to be slightly bigger than the other, so I don't mean that, but I mean some unevenness. The second thing to look for is the nipples, and in some women their nipples are always withdrawn and they're on both sides, and that's fine, that's totally okay. But if a nipple that used to be pointing out is now tugging in, that's probably not right. Again, wait for 3 or 4 weeks, but that's something to talk to the doctor about. And the third thing is rash or red kind of raised plaques on the skin is highly likely to be something completely benign. It's just an allergy or something like that. But if that persists for 3 or 4 weeks, that's worth talking to the doctor about as well.
So they're all visible symptoms. Is there anything else we should be on the lookout for?
Well, I think you'd naturally sort of assume if I've got cancer in my breast, it's going to hurt, so I'll watch out for breast pain. But in fact, breast cancer's very uncommonly hurt. And if you've got something causing breast pain, I'm not saying ignore it, wait and see, and if it persists, see the doctor, but it's probably going to turn out not to be breast cancer.
So don't panic is basically your message there? Absolutely
don't panic, and as I say, it's something to take seriously. It's potentially important, but it's not urgent, and it's always a good idea to wait 3 or 4 weeks. I think particularly if you're a premenopausal woman and you're having regular periods, as you all know, breasts change through the cycle. It's better to wait for a month and see if whatever you think was wrong or you were starting to panic about might just settle down on its own.
So you recommend self-checking?
The whole self-checking argument is complicated. On the one hand, you want to know, the sort of buzz phrase is breast awareness, but you want to know what your breasts feel like. If you're having a menstrual cycle, then you want to know how they change through the cycle, so that you can recognise if something feels abnormal. But in fact, interestingly, if you very, very carefully train women to examine their breasts for abnormalities, what's been shown in a clinical trial is that actually doesn't help, because you get lots of women talking to lots of doctors, having lots of mammograms and lots of biopsies, and almost all of it's not breast cancer. So you actually create more problems than you solve. So it's this halfway thing of don't completely ignore your breasts, but don't do a religious, really careful examination. It's a kind of once over, 3 times or 4 times a year.
So we know what our breasts look like. So if you just see something different, maybe that's when you go to a doctor.
If you see something different, you note it and you wait and you watch. And if 2 or 3 weeks later it's still the same, you see the doctor for a checkup.
That was Associate Professor Nicholas Wilcken, Breast Cancer Trials board member and medical oncologist. To find out more about breast cancer trials and our clinical trials research, visit breastcancertrials.org.au. To keep updated on the latest research, stories and breast cancer trials activity, make sure you rate, review and subscribe to the Breast Cancer Trials podcast and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn and Instagram.